yeah, I don't know what always one person can do, but at present, in some respects, the justice system we have is what that's for, is to address there's no other place really to address it. And of course, people increasingly get, all these things I agree to these terms, we're going into arbitration, and it's almost unavoidable lots of times. A lot of things are, there's arbitration clauses that, aren't really, maybe they never were fair, but the kinds of arbitrations is the needle's getting pushed to where they're less and less fair, I think. So anyways, we could talk about that, but there's many soapboxes to jump one to the other.
Yeah. But
it's like CrossFit.
You're a very techie kind of person, I see. You understand AI, you understand internet, you understand a lot of these things. One of the things that you're very passionate about is viewing law as a system. Law firms, what does that mean?
Well, every business really kind of runs the same way if you think about it. We take some kind of a raw material, we process it somehow, we turn it into some kind of a product, and which we sell, and that's where the money comes from, right? And so lawyers, if we have, and we wrote my friend Larry Port and Larry founded Rocket Matter. We wrote a book called The Lean Law Firm, which you have very graciously put the caption in my caption here, author of The Lean Law Firm. That's true. And what that book was about was, sort of its central premise was like, look, we're not different than a bike factory, right? A bike factory takes steel and titanium and they forge it into components and they assemble the components and they build a bicycle and they sell the bicycle. Maybe it's high end, they sell it for a lot, or maybe they make a lot of them and sell them for a little, but they are in the business of making bicycles, and that's how they make money. And we are sort of the same. We think like we're really different, lawyers do, but we run business. Our business is just like everybody else's, where we take some raw material, put it through a process, and that's where the money comes from. Our raw material is like people with problems, like a specific kind of problem, a legal need, or a company with a legal need. And, our process can be litigation. It could be transactional. And, that's how we get paid. Maybe we get paid kind of the old lawyer way of like by the hour. And in the book, we talk about this a lot. It's kind of a limiting factor because you only got so many hours. So you're always going to be capped off either by what the market will allow you to be paid, or how much you're willing to trade of your life to get paid. But, in the rest of the business world, they generally don't bill things that way and so like, I'm a big fan of like contingent and flat fees and stuff. I work almost really exclusively that way because, if I can create improvements in it, I'm always going to be the beneficiary of those. So I can make more money that way by, doing things for the same money in less time.
I love that. I love that. Like, you just made it like, it's so simple, because at the end, it's complicated, but you just simplified it and said all businesses, they run the same. We're not different than a bike factory. We take raw material and put it through the process, and we just solve it. Right? Basically, did I say it incorrectly?
Yeah, basically that's it. No, you got it right. And the thing that got me into all of that was like, early in my career, somewhat after like finally escaping family court, like I started to think about like, well, if I want to make more money in this, I was an hourly biller, like some people, how would I do that? I could work more, but I don't really want to do that. And I don't feel like I can go up on my rate very much. So what do I do? And I looked at I kind of looked like for like in traditional law firm management books, how do you succeed as a lawyer? Because, I'm in a small practice and eventually in a solo practice. And how do you do that? And all the books that I found were like, seemed like they were written in like 1955. They were all like, oh, well, your day should look like this. You wake up in the morning, you roll into the office at 9, you read the advance sheets, you dictate some things, you make some calls, you go to lunch for 2 hours, you come back, maybe you meet a few people and you go home. And I'm like, that's like a 1950s sitcom, that's like where the guy's a lawyer. That's not my reality. My reality is like, I'm trying to, eat a Hot Pocket while I'm looking on my phone at what, Kim and Kanye are fighting about today. And so I was like, I gotta figure out a different way. So I started reading things that were really geared towards manufacturing. I don't know if people who've been, So
what?
Because, well, here's why. Because if we kind of accept that we're a business like any other running a system that's kind of a linear system, you prospect for raw material, you get your clients, you put them through some sort of a process. Their process is, I got a problem. Your product is, you solve that problem, you get paid that way. Then you start to realize it's just like, I'm just doing what Henry Ford was doing, where he's like taking metal and rubber and making a car out of it and selling the car. So if I can like kind of take stuff and, for lack of a better word, steal it from manufacturing science, who's been at this problem for 120 years, maybe that's what I should look at. And so I started looking at things like the Toyota production system. There's a book by a guy named Eliyahu Goldratt, who's an Israeli physicist, but it's a super accessible book called The Goal that if you ever go into business school, they make you read most of the time. And so from reading that, and he talks about something called a theory of constraints, which is basically like your process is only as fast and as good as like your slowest, weakest part of that process.